Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into one of the most, well, explosive periods in modern American history, the 1960s. This wasn't just a decade that changed politics. It fundamentally shifted the culture, the norms, even the relationship between citizens and authority itself.
Yeah, it's fascinating. For almost 20 years after World War II, there was this broad consensus,
Yeah.
especially around anti-communism.
Right, a kind of unified front, domestically at least.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
then, boom, in about 10 years, that consensus just crumbled.
So our mission today is to unpack how that happened. Specifically, how the kids who grew up in all that post-war prosperity went from, let's say, general conformity to, outright rejection of their parents' values, social, economic, political, all of it.
And the mechanism behind that rupture is key. The affluence of the 50s paradoxically gave this generation the security, the education, the space, really, to become disillusioned. So we're going to trace three main threads happening more or less at the same time. First, the huge political opposition sparked by Vietnam. Second, the intellectual groundwork of the New Left's critique of America itself. And third, that radical social break, the counterculture.
Okay.
And together, these things did something pretty unprecedented. They basically normalized questioning every institution.
Yeah.
They brought in this wave of informality and permanently changed, norms around sex and family life.
Okay, so let's start unpacking that. Where else to begin but with the spark, right? The Vietnam War, it wasn't some abstract debate for young people.
No, absolutely not.
It was intensely personal. It made political conflict a real physical risk.
The scale of the anti-war activism was just massive,
Yeah.
unlike anything seen before. And the main engine, the draft.
Conscript?
Yeah, college-age men were facing it directly. Suddenly, the war wasn't just over there. It was a personal threat every single day. It forced them, really, to confront the morality, the human cost.
And why this war caused such a reaction? You're saying technology played a huge role.
Totally. This was the first living room war. You had graphic images, actual battlefield deaths, civilian suffering beamed right into people's homes on TV. That kind of media coverage, it just blew apart the government's ability to completely control the narrative about the war's morality. It fueled skepticism, even outrage.
Right. And the groups protesting, it wasn't just students, was it?
Not at all. It was a really diverse mix.
Yeah.
Students, sure, but also clergy, intellectuals, pacifists, even veterans coming back.
And critically, this tied into racial justice too, didn't it? Because minority communities often faced the draft, faced combat disproportionately.
Absolutely. That link was crucial. It connected foreign policy directly to domestic inequality. Big time.
But it wasn't like all young people were on the same page politically.
Oh, definitely not. It gets complicated. You basically had two major competing youth organizations. On one side, Students for Democratic Society, SDS.
STS, right.
They were all about participatory democracy. They rejected what they saw as, America's imperialist foreign policy. They laid it all out in their big statement, the Port Huron Statement.
Hold on, let's pause there for a sec. For someone maybe using this deep dive as a shortcut, what is the core message of Port Huron? What did SDS actually want?
Yeah, good question. It's a long document, but the heart of it was this radical idealism. It called for participatory democracy, meaning people should have a real say in the decisions affecting their lives. Not just, voting passively for politicians every few years. They were pushing back hard against Cold War thinking and the idea that some centralized bureaucracy always knew best.
Okay, got it. But you mentioned a competing group.
Right, the conservative counterpoint, Young Americans for Freedom, or YAF.
YAF, and their take on the war.
They were strong advocates. They saw Vietnam as absolutely necessary to contain communism globally, to maintain U.S. leadership on the world stage. So, yeah, not a unified youth protest at all, a really fractured political scene, with both sides claiming they represented true American ideals.
You can really feel that tension in some of the events, like the 1967 March on the Pentagon, tens of thousands protesting.
And that famous attempt to levitate the Pentagon.
Right. Which sounds kind of out there, but it was symbolic, wasn't it?
Totally symbolic.
Oh.
It was aimed squarely at what President Eisenhower had warned about the military-industrial complex. That whole network of defense contractors, the military, parts of the government, all benefiting from ongoing conflict. The protesters saw the Pentagon as the literal heart of that system.
And the dissent wasn't just marches. Muhammad Ali, in '67, refusing the draft on religious and moral grounds. That was huge.
Seismic, like you said earlier. He used his fame, put his career on the line to make a stand based on personal conscience. It forced mainstream America to confront the cost of just going along.
But things got darker. The stakes got tragically high. Kent State, 1970.
Yeah. The National Guard firing on students protesting Nixon pushing the war into Cambodia. 4 students killed.
Just horrific.
It sent shockwaves. It showed that protesting, even on a college campus, could literally be a matter of life and death. The scale of protests was massive too, like the moratorium protests in '69. Millions involved nationwide.
Okay, so the war provided that initial fire, the personal stakes. But the opposition, it sounds like it evolved beyond just get troops out.
Exactly.
How did they use that momentum to build a broader critique of American life itself? Which I guess brings us to the New Left.
That's the critical pivot. The activists started asking, if our government can fail so badly morally overseas, what failures are happening right here at home? The critique just exploded outwards, targeting mainstream liberalism, the whole domestic status quo.
And it's interesting that they were critical of things like LBJ's Great Society programs.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? Because the Great Society was this huge government effort, right? Yeah. Anti-poverty stuff, education, healthcare.
Seems like something liberals would support. So why did the New Left push back?
Well, they saw it as fundamentally insufficient, like just patching things up, bureaucratic. They argued these programs didn't dismantle the real roots of poverty or segregation or systemic inequality.
I see.
Their argument was kind of like, if the government's pouring billions into what they see as an immoral imperialist war, then it's choosing not to solve these urgent problems at home.
So the solution wasn't just more laws, it was changing the structure itself. That participatory democracy idea again.
Exactly. Rejecting hierarchy. Students should run universities. Workers run factories. Communities run their own affairs. That was the vision.
Were there specific thinkers influencing this?
Oh, yeah. People like C. Wright Mills were very influential. He encouraged them to stop just tweaking policies and start really analyzing the underlying social structures. The problem wasn't just bad implementation, it was the power structure itself.
And groups like SDS kept organizing, right? Making those connections, explicit war spending versus domestic needs.
Absolutely. They were crucial in linking the movements.
Yeah.
Civil rights, economic justice, anti-war, showing how they were all interconnected.
Okay, let's pivot again from the sort of intellectual framework to, well, daily life, culture, aesthetics. If the New Left was the political brain, then the counterculture was maybe the heart, the vibe?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. This was a head-on rejection of that whole post-war suburban American dream package.
Everything their parents had built up.
Pretty much. The core principles were things like anti-materialism, anti-conformity, a huge emphasis on personal freedom, cultural experimentation. It wasn't just about, wearing different clothes, though that was part of it. It was a conscious choice to not be part of that corporate, consumerist, two-car garage world.
And the hippie lifestyle kind of embodied this, centered in places like Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco.
Right. That became an epicenter. Communal living, the unconventional clothes, lots of color, flowing fabrics, trying consciously to step outside capitalist norms.
And this went deep into personal experience too, right? Drugs played a big role.
Oh, absolutely. LSD, marijuana, other psychedelics, they were pretty integral. And not just seen as recreation. For many, it was about spiritual exploration, finding artistic inspiration, even building a sense of shared community, a different kind of consciousness.
And this coincided with the sexual revolution.
Yeah, they were intertwined. They were openly criticizing the rigid 1950s family model, advocating for premarital sex, access to birth control, more gender equality, sexual liberation in general, trying to dismantle what they saw as these really stifling moral codes.
And music was the soundtrack for all this.
Massively important. Folk music, rock music. You had Bob Dylan, Joan Baez articulating the critique early on. Then the explosion of psychedelic rock, Jimi Hendrix, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. Their music wasn't just entertainment. It was the cultural critique. It gave voice to this alternative way of living.
And if there's one moment that kind of crystallizes all of it, the music, the politics, the communal vibe, the experimentation, it's got to be Woodstock in '69.
Woodstock, yeah. Almost 400,000 people. It became this huge symbol, the high watermark maybe, of that whole radical experiment and liberation. It just showed the sheer scale of the desire for something different.
But that specific counterculture movement, as a visible force, didn't last forever in that form, did it?
No, it eventually fragmented. Partly, the darker side, the toll of heavy drug use became apparent. And frankly, it lacked any real central organization, which made it hard to sustain momentum. It kind of burned bright and faded.
But the energy didn't just vanish into thin air.
Not at all. The legacy is huge.
Right.
Many people who were part of it took that energy, those ideals, and channeled them into more formal political activism or into academia, community organizing. They carried those new left principles into the institutions they've been critiquing.
Right. And that intersectionality you mentioned earlier, linking anti-war to civil rights, feminism, that became a lasting model.
Precisely. Anti-war activism helped forge those connections, showing how race, class, gender concerns were all linked. And maybe the biggest legacy is that deep, ingrained skepticism towards government, towards big business, towards established institutions in general, that really became a defining feature of American life after the 60s, and you could argue it still is.
So summing it all up, the 60s basically blew up the old consensus. It normalized challenging authority, made widespread social critique legitimate, a kind of two-front revolution, political action against the war and this cultural liberation against conformity at home. It just changed the game for what we expect from leaders in society.
Absolutely. And, thinking about that shift from consensus to this deep skepticism, so much of it was fueled by people suddenly seeing the reality of war unfiltered in their living rooms.
Right, the visual evidence.
Yeah. Which leads to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. In today's world where visual evidence isn't just available, it's hyper-available, instantly shareable everywhere, is it even possible for any established authority, political or cultural, to ever regain that kind of unquestioned legitimacy that generations before the 60s seemed to enjoy? Something to think about.